Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
Happy Monday, Heat Seekers. Welcome back. It is another IDP Heat Seekers episode. And tonight we're going to have some fun. We have fun most nights, but tonight it's going to be a fun one because we're going to be talking IDP Strategies. This was one of our most viewed streams of 2020. So we're going to update it, add a little extra flavor to it, and see if we can give you a more informed and up-to-date version of what we talked about last year. But before we get into all that, Mr. Kraig, how are we doing tonight, brother? How was Monday treating you? I know no DMV trips to make Monday go crazy, but how were things in your world?
No, I worked today, which was fine. I got quite a bit done, which is always good. Kids are done with swimming lessons. They're still in summer school, so it's still crazy around bedtime with those summer shenanigans that always seem to happen around bedtime, even more so than when they're in school, which I guess is probably better that way. Maybe they get to better on school, but we know that also doesn't happen. So either way, we're here. We're ready to talk IDP. How are you doing?
Yeah, the same. I, truth be told, I was recording one of our next videos that'll be dropping here on the Roto Heat YouTube channel, and every few minutes or so, my youngest kept coming down asking for something new and bringing another piece of her bedroom with her because, it's bedtime in my house as well. So that's the summer. The sun's out. Kids don't think they need to go to bed. And here the sun doesn't set till, 10 o'clock basically most of the time. So it's, as a parent, summers are what they're going to be. I've got them in, swimming and gymnastics and dance to try to keep them and get them tired so bedtime can be a little more successful, because most my evenings are studying, watching film of college guys, making videos for YouTube. I mean, all those things. So my nights, I kind of try to get free so that I can do this stuff. So I hear you. The bedtimes in the summer are a little bit exhaustive, but can't complain. I mean, kids are doing great. Kids are having fun. Kids are growing and learning. So not as good as Brandon Jacobs, though, who is our only piece of news this week, and it's more of a comic relief piece of news. But I did read that Brandon Jacobs does believe he can be a defensive end. I believe he's 37, 38 years old now, and he was saying if Tim Tebow could play tight end, I can certainly come back and be a defensive end. I don't know if it's anything more than a good chuckle and a feel-good story. I would love to see the 6'4", what was he, like 270-pound running back play defensive end, seeing as he hadn't done that since, probably high school, I would guess. Other than that, there's not really anything going on in the world. Training camp for your Cowboys opens in less than a month, July 21st. Them in Pittsburgh reports, but there's nothing else going on in the world. Any news or notes or anything fun that you've come across that you want to chat about?
No, I know most of the relevant stuff just in general NFL news. It's sort of offensive related that you guys with Sully touch on in your show tomorrow, so make sure you tune in for that. There's always just little tidbits like Jelani Tavai says he wants to play at 245 for your Lions this year. So, I mean, to your point, this is that low part of the summer where there's not usually a whole lot of news unless it's something really big or really bad. Those are sort of the two things that you get this time of year.
Yeah.
And I'm not one to, and I'll do it in jest, but I'm not one to make stuff up or throw out hot takes just for the fun of it. I'll throw some smart aleck comment. I'll keep it PG here for fun. But besides that, I mean, don't make something out to be that isn't there. And it's all guesswork by and large right now. So if you want to throw out 100 guesses and then claim you're right when, 5 of them hit later, hey, great for you. But just not my kind of thing. So.
Well, and I did enjoy, reading the take that about Aaron Rodgers. He has till July 2nd to decide if he wants to, opt out for the year. And, and when you look at his salary and all that, and I know this is the defensive show, but the Aaron Rodgers stuff still cracks me up. I mean, I just wish that there would be a conclusion at this point so that people can move on from it, because it's been going on way too long now. Aaron Rodgers should not get this much conversation about whether he's going to play or not. There's plenty of other things to talk about.
Well, are there? I mean, there's plenty of things.
I would rather talk about Jelani Tavai's weight loss journey than Aaron Rodgers at this point.
I care about equally for both of them, to be quite honest, at this point, just because it's so much static and, it's going to end up being whatever it is. And if you're taking that chance with Aaron Rodgers, you're knowingly taking that chance.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been on the record several times. I don't think he plays this year in Green Bay. So,
yeah,
it seems like he won't be playing at all if that's the case.
That opt-out, he doesn't play at all. I mean, he gets paid, but he's not playing. I think he makes a good portion of his contract, but I feel for Green Bay. I mean, that they're in a bit of a pinch, even though I want to see them lose every game. As the Lions fan of me, I want them to lose, but it's like, come on, man, that's got to be a tough way to run your bit. I mean, just like with Houston situation at quarterback, very dire. The team looks a lot different if Deshaun Watson's throwing the ball as opposed to, Tyrod Taylor and Davis Mills and whoever else. So, these teams you feel for, but we still got a month for them to figure this stuff out. So hopefully it gets resolved.
We'll find out when we find out.
Yeah, for sure. So if you guys have questions, tonight we're talking kind of IDP strategy. So if you're trying to figure out something or have a question, as always, drop in the chat. You know that we'll answer you here live, and I even come back and answer after the fact because I keep an eye on all of our comments and try to do our best to get you good answers. But last year when we did this this live stream, we talked from a couple of different aspects. We talked, kind of redraft, because there are redraft IDP leagues, and we want to make sure you guys are getting some love too. And then we talked a little bit from the dynasty perspective as well, from the other side of it. So, Kraig, I'll let you choose and let you decide how you want to start talking. But what kind of popped up in your mind and you wanted to touch on first and foremost?
Hello, can you hear me? I'm making sure this.
Nope, you're good.
Wonders of technology you're getting used to. So you can bring up that screenshot of the ledge that I had sent you, kind of just as a discussion point. And this works for either one of them, really. And this is extremely simplistic. I kind of just threw this together at the end here during the day to have something to use as a reference point. You can do something very much more in depth than this, but this is just a snapshot of two different leagues that we have. The first one is the Positionless League that Brad and I have talked about on here before. Off to the right there, you can see you start 9 of any IDP position. The second league there, ranking 2, you start 2 linebackers, 1 interior lineman, 2 edge, and 2 defensive backs. And then I just did the last year, and generally, if you're going really in depth for dynasty and things like that, you probably want to be looking at more than a 1-year sample size. But this works for redraft too. If you know your settings, there's plenty of either Excel sheets that people have out there, or other programs. Some sites let you do it where once you have your scoring for your league set up, you can go in and see what the scoring would have been for people last year. So at the top there, it's the highest scoring, which is first player at that position. Then the 20th, 40th, and 60th. You could do these at whatever intervals you want. And that second grouping is the difference between the first and 20th, first and 40th, difference of 20th to 40th, and, on down through. So you can sort of see just when you're grouping as a reference point of making your own tiers, which is really sort of this is getting at when you're planning a draft, with the scoring system that your league has, and both of these you can tell have very different scorings. We've talked about the one on the right here has that scoring we've talked about on the show before, that you can find the article over at rotoheat.com. The other one, the Positionless League, has tiered scoring even for positions that we're able to do over on Flea Flicker, where different positions like defensive tackles have a higher points per tackle rate or something like that to have them have more value. But you can see then through something like this, the drop off even per position of, all right, the top guy scores this much. You could break it down further, every 5 spots or 10 spots, just to get a feel of when you're creating those tiers. All right, where am I going to see value start dropping off? Once the top X linebackers go or something, is there value at taking someone in that next group, or should I switch to looking at taking a top safety if they're still available? So knowing your league is something that we say probably every episode, and if not every other episode. You have to know how many people you're starting at each position. You have to know your scoring. And then, of course, there's always going to be the variable of your league mates that can completely throw things off. But setting something up like this just to give yourself a reference point either way is something I found extremely valuable.
Yeah, it's fascinating when, and obviously, truth be told, I saw this probably 10 minutes before the show went on, so I was looking at it, but it's pretty clear that you see the value is basically what we've been telling you here on the IDP side for a while. Linebackers, defensive end, then safety, and interior line, and then cornerback is one of those, that position that we tell you to continually churn and rotate in and out. But the thing that was most surprising me, looking at ranking one, and either one really, is the variance between 1 and 20 at safety is not as much as I would have thought. I would have thought there would have been a bigger drop off. So I wonder if it makes you think about maybe not taking safety so high, because you can still get good. If you're looking truly just at these, if you can get value there maybe a little later where you can't some of these other positions. What did you think when you were analyzing your data and kind of looking through this?
Yeah, and again, both these leagues use the edge position, your linebacker, and it'd probably be defensive line, or maybe just a defensive and defensive tackle. But things can be very different depending on how, if you're grouping your edge and linebackers together, there's going to be a lot less of a difference between your like 1 and 20 and all that, because you're grouping these guys together. But yeah, I mean, to your point, you want to be getting probably more of those top linebacker, top edge guys. Those are the ones that you want to be targeting, because you can see, in either one, the difference between 1 and 40 or 60, there's a much larger variance. You're looking at one on the left there, 165, 159 point difference between the number 1 and the number 60, where cornerbacks, which we'll talk about tonight, but there's only 100 points difference. That's another 50, 60. And the other thing that you can do, again, this is something very simplistic, but you can partition this out to like over a 16 game season, where you can figure out the average player plays 15 or 14, whatever it is. How many points per game does it equal to? I wouldn't want to start off my sheet with just that information, because if you look at just points per game, who's the highest and who's the 20th, you might have a guy that's number 1 that's some sort of obscure outlier because he played 3 games where he did great, and those are the only 3 that he played. So you have to take both into account when you're looking at something like this. And Excel sheets, Google Sheets can work wonders with the different functions and formulas that if you dig into it, you can use. But the other thing that I noticed, more so in just the standard scoring across all positions on the right, but there's not that big of a difference between your top 20 safeties and your top 20 cornerbacks. The only problem is that, and maybe this is better for redraft, not so much dynasty, there's a larger variance year to year in who those cornerbacks are going to be generally. But in redraft, if you're able to churn through and identify one of those guys, you have a really good chance at getting, safety 2 level scoring out of your cornerback 2, or something like that too. So cornerbacks aren't nearly as throwaway as I think a lot of people feel. At the same time, I think it's harder to identify who the producers are year to year.
Yeah, and I would encourage you guys, anybody who comes across the stream at some point, whether you're watching tonight live with us or you watch in the future, rotoheat.com, we have updated, our dynasty IDP rankings. Now, if you're looking at it from a redraft perspective, this isn't specifically based on a 1-year sampling. This is truly dynasty rankings. But a lot of that I think can still help you when it comes to drafting. As we looked at that data set, and as we looked at the information provided, does it change your perspective when you go into a draft, whether it's redraft or a dynasty? And probably need to touch on both. But last year when we spoke about strategies, we talked about, around the 6th round is the sweet spot of when we start to see guys coming off the boards. Based on the data that you're looking at and what you've experienced over this last year since we've had that conversation, is your perspective still we really should start seeing the top IDP options come off the board? And is it still, linebacker, defensive end kind of in the top grouping? I know if you look at our rankings here over on the site, linebacker, defensive end, safety, a little bit of safety sprinkled in there. And then we see one outlier, D tackle, which is Aaron Donald, who's, just a man amongst boys everywhere.
Yeah.
What's your take on all that?
So in terms of what positions, whether you call them all linebackers and defensive ends or, linebackers, edge, whatever you want to group them as, those clearly are like the higher guys. And even with that bigger drop off, you can tell there's a huge drop off from, 1 to 40. It's 130 points or 137. It's over 100 points in either format. With the other positions, you're not getting that. So those are clearly the ones that you want to be targeting more early on. In terms of where you want to see them drafted, that positionless league, if we were to put quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, all that sort of stuff in there with it, there wouldn't be the disparity that you would see on the one on the right. The right standard scoring across all the positions really is just more of an introductory sort of beginner level IDP scoring where it's, somewhere around a third to a half, the scoring of a lot of your top offensive guys, where when you want to be looking at, you're sitting here, your top defensive player was 249 in that positionless league scoring. And I can't tell you exactly who that is. I'm pretty sure that's Roquan Smith.
Last year would have been, I believe it was Roquan. Hold on, I'll pull it up and let you know.
But then, if you want to go the other way, and again, this is where you have to know your league. This is very unique. You have to start one quarterback, but the rest of the offensive positions, it's positionless too. So you don't have to start another quarterback. You could start, I think it's 11 starters on offense, something like that. You could start 10 tight ends, or something like that.
It's actually Devin White, and Roquan Smith was
Devin White.
So pretty close.
So, you got 249 for a linebacker. The highest scoring quarterback was Josh Allen in this format at 495.8. And then you want to get down to non-quarterbacks. I think we got Kamara at like 413. So, you're looking at a 150-point difference, which if you're going to take that proportionally isn't the same as you would see over in that sort of standard across all. So to really expand this out and make it useful, you'd want to see, all right, scoring wise, here's sort of where the tiers are for tight end, wide receiver, running back, quarterback scoring, and sort of fit these defensive slots and their scoring into it as well. But you'd see, and we did in that draft when we had it last year, when we started the league, it was auction, but your top IDP guys were going for top value outside of your top, tier of quarterbacks, or probably two tiers of quarterbacks, running backs, and then, wide receivers didn't have the same sort of value. They were probably more in line with linebackers and edge players. So if you're converting that from an auction to a normal draft day, probably around that 6, 7, 8 round range, you're going to start to see a lot of these defensive guys go off the board, whereas you're probably going to be in the double-digit rounds for a standard 12-team league with that other scoring that we have up on there.
Yeah, it was interesting when you're looking through, especially something like the positionless league. There were 46 offensive players before a defensive guy in that kind of order. I think it was 46 that scored higher than Devin White. And it's so I don't want to say that there's much lesser value, but when you look at the guys that are ahead of him, like Robert Woods, Josh Jacobs, then you got obviously some big names: Amari, Keenan Allen, Mike Evans, AJ Brown. These guys all scored higher, and some of them just barely higher. Robert Woods was 2 points higher than Devin White, and all these guys are within 20 points, because they're all right around the 50 spot. It's interesting when you think about trying to draft a roster from the IDP perspective for a 1-year push. So if you're going into it going, okay, I want to win it this year in a redraft format, you're really not going to want to touch any defensive guys until, probably the top 50 players are taken, potentially and obviously it's depending on your scoring, things we always say. That's always should be a given. And in my mind, that's, if you're in a 12-team league, that's, like we've talked about, 6, 7. I mean, so a lot of the strategies that we talked about last year still seem to be pretty much hold true. We didn't really see a big shift in IDP in this last year, and to really cause us to think anything differently, at least in my mind. You didn't see anything change. I would think that would make you change your opinion on where IDPs are going or should go, I would assume.
No, and you said it was around that 46 or so range from last year. If you want to be talking about, the other league, I mean, you're talking around 60 or so. And these are, the top guys on your IDP side going somewhere. This is probably your group of lower wide receiver 2 range. I mean, Curtis Samuel, DJ Moore, Chase Claypool, Deontay, CeeDee Lamb, Kareem Hunt, all of those guys were above. Cooper Kupp scored almost exactly the same as Roquan Smith, and you're like into the early 60s there. So, you're talking a difference of round 5 versus round 3 or 4 in the other one if you want to compare the scoring. So is it a huge difference? No, and especially not for someone like me probably, where I really don't like to be the guy that starts the trend. I would rather sit back and wait, especially if it's something like just a 12-team snake league, which, a lot of leagues still are, because then you can react and say, all right, especially if you have something set up like this where you can see, all right, my top 5 linebackers went off the board, but my top edge guy is still there. Maybe you go take that edge guy because you see defensive players are coming off the board. You don't want to be hung out to dry, but you don't want to be caught reaching for your 10th linebacker when the value isn't going to be the same as another position, or just sticking with offense for a little while. You don't have to be the guy that reaches to take that position. Just don't ignore it later on either, unless you're, if you're going to be punting the first year to, just try to build youth and go that way, maybe that's fine, but most people don't do that either. So,
right. Very true. And even in a positionless league, I attempted to draft a roster that would be a winner and then quickly realized it wasn't and traded off pieces that didn't hold value to me long term, so I could build on my roster this year, and it wound up getting me some assets I really liked in draft picks and things like that. So, know your league, know yourself, know the situation, and don't be afraid to sell off in a dynasty situation if you're not winning, if you can get good return on that value, on that investment. I mean, and even in the draft this year, I was really pleasantly surprised. I was able to turn, I don't know, what was it, a third, multiple fourths, things like that for Patrick Queen, guy who really excelled, but somebody wanted that pick so bad that they were willing to trade, and I look at it as a win for me. Don't be afraid to jump.
Well, and some of these things that you sit and look at will help you too, even if you just have this base tier knowledge scoring when you're going into a rookie draft. Our first round draft here in this league on the left that we had up there, we didn't have any defensive guys go. But then right around that Bateman, Elijah Moore, Devonta Smith sort of round 2 at the start, we had Micah Parsons go. So if you kind of look at it, all right, Micah Parsons, the best you're probably going to be hoping for is 240, 250 in terms of points, where those offensive guys, if you really you're going to have different projections all over the place here, let's be honest, but just for the sake of a conversation, if you want to say you have Devonta Smith as your top 2 wide receiver, and you think that he's going to be, a top 10 guy in the NFL, you're still looking at around the same value as Micah Parsons in that 260, in this sort of format, 250, 260. So go get him. If he's your top linebacker and that's sort of the round that you're seeing with these wide receivers or running backs, go for it. But if you are just, throwing darts at the board and ignoring what's going on in terms of your scoring and trends from prior years, and again, I would recommend doing more than 1 year, especially last year, which we know was just a wonky year to begin with. You might be sitting back thinking, all right, I can get him later. And maybe you can. The next defensive player didn't go until 212 at the very end, and then, it started being a run on defensive players. So even if you miss out on that top guy, I don't think that you just have to reach either.
Absolutely. Good point. Anthony asks, which IDP position do you need the most roster depth for? And are there any positions that you can stream for and maybe not need to have very many backups? Clearly, I will always tell you cornerback is a position that you can stream because from a week-to-week basis, you never know who's going to be the guy. You can always go out and swoop somebody up and put them in. For me, I think I probably tend to roster more linebackers than anything or safeties. You know, in most leagues, I look on my taxi squad. I tend to have a lot of safeties or linebackers on there. But Kraig, what's your take? What position needs more room on the depth chart, and which one are you not even worried about? You're just going to stream them.
Yeah, I mean, cornerbacks, to the point that we've said on here and said a lot before, and even if you sort of look at interior linemen, there just isn't that sort of, you know, once you get past the first group, really, you know, the first 20 guys, and, you know, that's probably, hopefully, your interior lineman too, that you're not taking your first guy that deep. But even if you're, you know, looking past the Aaron Donald, DeForest Buckner, maybe your top 5, if we had broken this down further, you're not going to see as huge of a drop as you're going to at another position. So if you're going to stream any cornerback and probably interior lineman, depth-wise, yeah, your linebackers, your edge, and then the safety is sort of in that middle zone, I think, because there isn't that huge of a drop-off, really, when you're, you know, looking at 1 to 20. And then between 40 and 60, you know, the drop-off is even less. So, you know, get a couple guys early and then, you know, save some room for some dart throws, but you're not going to really, outside of your top 20, 25, 30, have a whole lot that you're probably going to be thinking you're going to start. So find guys that you're hopeful on. Maybe if they break out and have a chance, go get them. But those are sort of how linebacker, edge, depending on how you want to have it, then safety, and then at the bottom with your streamings, your interior linemen and cornerbacks. I would agree.
Very good. Our boy Joss is baking up there in Seattle. He asked, are there any heat expert advice on staying cool? Just got back from the store with a fan. I will tell you that I bought a fan today as well. My air conditioning is working perfectly fine, but my office, this room that you see me in right now, is the room I'm in all day working, and it is toasty because the sun just beats in through the windows. So I have a fan to my left on my desk that's a little USB desk fan. I've got a big fan on the floor that I don't have on right now, so I'm sweating because the room is still warm from the heat baking me all day. Joss, I know the pain. It gets toasty here in the Midwest as well. Hopefully, it cools off for you soon. I would encourage you to just keep enjoying that fan, man. Make sure you do some of those noises we used to do when we were kids. The put your face in there and make some funny sounds and keep yourself entertained.
He said he went and got a fan. I thought maybe he picked up Sully from somewhere just to go fan him. I hadn't heard much from Sully today. And
he got the ultimate fan. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
The man, the myth, the Sully. Yeah, I didn't hear a lot from him today either. He work must have been cramping his style, and he was hiding from the team, I guess. I don't know.
We know we're all fans of Jaws, so hey, who knows? Maybe he went picked one of the other guys up. Rick, I haven't heard much from either, so who knows?
Maybe Jaws has Sully and Rick making that bootleg NFL sideline miss machine that he's looking for. Who knows?
We don't need to go down that route. In the basement well or something.
Hey, you know what? Puts the lotion on, I guess, or gets the hose.
That's right.
So if you have questions, make sure to get them in the comments. Anthony, I appreciate it, brother. If you have more questions, make sure to pump them in there. And, and when you're talking about roster depth for your IDP roster, I'm not opposed to taking some of these rookies and stashing them. Guys for me like Patrick Jones from Minnesota, guys that are a step behind the starters that are in a favorable position for possible playing time. Like a guy like Patrick Jones in Minnesota is a perfect example for me because what's ahead of him is Danielle Hunter and not much else. I mean, he has the talent that if he picks up that scheme quickly, he could be a guy that attacks from the edge and maybe get you some fantasy points. Could project into a role sooner rather than later. So I'll stash him. that's more of a dynasty tactic or tip in my mind than a redraft. In redraft, you just go for the guys that you know are going to consistently point for you, and then call it a show. I mean, cornerback, obviously you got to churn those guys weekly because anything's possible. You have to. And when I'm looking at corners in a redraft situation, I'm looking at, what position who they're going to be covering typically. I tend to stay away from shutdown corners, the Jair Alexanders of the world and players like that. But look at where they're playing at mostly, like if the guy's in the slot more than he is on the outside, things like that. There's some value to be had depending on where the guy's going to be at, who he's covering, things like that. So that's just my words of encouragement from my years of experience with IDP is know where the guy's going to be playing, especially at the cornerback position, because there could be value to be had there. If if you'd have been looking at that, Mike Hilton would have been a guy you would have targeted for a while because he got picked on a lot. He just wasn't great, and teams targeted him.
Yeah, and also know what's happening with some of those guys. Hilton's not on the same team, and if you're not paying attention, most sites have little player team colors and, name on it or something like that. But you have a few too many drinks before your live draft with your friends, or something like that. Just have something there to save yourself and, do yourself a little favor and pay attention ahead of time to what's going on, because something as simple as that, like, oh, Hilton's amazing, I'm going to go draft him. And I'm not saying he won't be, but player changing situation can matter a lot for a guy like that. And they did pay him well, so I expect him to play. But I'm not saying it's going to end up being the same in Cincinnati as it was in Pittsburgh. So,
oh, absolutely. And for 2021, if I was going to give you a cornerback or a cornerback room to keep an eye on, it'd be Detroit's. I mean, I like Okudah and I like Omani Aruarie. I think they can both be starters, but they're still young in a new scheme. They're going to get picked on, especially if they're the starters. Detroit's scheme looks like it's probably going to be more zones instead of more man than it was last year with Patricia. So that could affect it as well. But I would target those guys as guys to look at playing if you had to start a corner, because I expect them to be picked on. If look for teams that are changing scheme where they're having to learn new concepts or things that they haven't had to do in a while. Okudah does a good job in zone from what Aaron Glenn says, because he's coached him before in different camps and things like that. But, I would look at teams like that, or Houston. Houston's going to get picked on because, but you have to be careful. Houston will get picked on until the other team's up a bunch, and then they're going to start running the ball a bunch. So, so you have to be mindful of the situation you're looking at from the quarterback position, at least.
Yeah. And, something as simple as those little charts like we had up, you can see there's some positions where when you're searching for someone on your back end to fill up a roster spot or something like that, safety having, the biggest discrepancy between, like picks 40 to 60, when you're sort of at your bottom of the barrel guys that you're hoping not to start, but, maybe injuries happened or something like that I wouldn't have expected. Cornerback, I sort of did expect that, where, there really is a low discrepancy and you'd have to go look at the players, how much they played, all that. Don't take one little Excel sheet that you or I or anyone makes that as the be all end all, because there's so much more that goes into all of it. But you can go and see when you set something up like this, all right, player X scored this many, and you can correlate that to, points per game or something like that, because points per game is really what you're trying to get at the end. You can take out outliers yourself, but, that really isn't something that I would want to be doing year to year, because it's still data of what happened in the NFL. The NFL is random. You're going to have things. But if you see something crazy that is just a one-off that isn't going to happen again, you can make that choice too, to ignore it or accept it. So there's a lot that you can do to set yourself up to succeed. Every year there's more tools out there. There's people on Twitter you can find that have Excel sheets of, make your own projections, where if, your linebacker one scored XXX, you can plug all this in there to have your own tiers and rankings created for you. And it's a wide world of technology and information out there, and you can get lost in it. Some of us do. We all get lost at times, but for your average player, even just getting a feel for where you want to have your tier set up can give you a big advantage in your work league or a home friends league or whatever it is.
We all go a little crazy sometimes. I felt like that's where you were going.
And every now and then I fall apart. So.
Every now and then I fall apart.
Right.
And I would encourage you to look back, especially if you're in a dynasty situation, look back at how your league mates drafted previously.
Yeah.
So look through where they were targeting positions, because as you do that over time, you'll begin to build a profile. It's almost like scouting. So, we've dived into the world of scouting with rookiedraftguy.com. We've dived into it and we're building profiles of players and watching film to gain a perspective. Well, you're doing the same thing with your league mates. It may not be as in-depth, like you don't care about the character of your league mates. You just care about how they draft and how they run their team. I get it. But you build that profile, then you begin to see how they draft, when they start to target guys, how much, truly do they care about IDP, or are they guys that are just constantly churning that roster and streaming IDP options? So, get to know and get to understand the drafting, tactics your league mates have, because the same will be done in redraft. So if you're in a league with guys dynasty wise, then you start to mingle in redraft with some of these guys you then already know. Or if you're, it's just a good way to prepare yourself, and you don't have to spend a lot of time doing it. Typically when I go into a draft or get ready for one, like Positionless, for instance, was a little bit of a crapshoot because I just had 1 year to look at and go, okay, well, this is kind of what some of these guys did. And I had to guess a little bit. I was wrong in some cases, and I waited too long, but that's okay. Oh yeah, don't forget Discord. Anthony brought up a perfect point. He said, "Thank you guys always for the solid advice. I'm going to show you guys in the Discord my latest team. I just finished drafting for his dynasty league that has 99 IDP starting spots. So we'll make sure after the show we jump over there and take a peek, Anthony. For anyone else that hasn't joined the Roto Heat Discord, do so. It's a cool free way to jump on there and have a conversation with other like-minded individuals that are trying to do the same things. We talk a lot of trades. We get a lot of advice. We post our content, our videos in there for you guys. And he used Roto Heat rankings as a guide. So his team is obviously going to be baller. I love it, Anthony. I love it. So make sure you jump over there. If you don't know how to get to Discord, let us know, and I'll make sure I drop the link in there for y'all. Jaws wants to know, Keanu Neal listed at 17 in ADP. Still have top 5 hopes? Am I deluded?
Yeah. As a Dallas fan, I say yeah, and we'll have to see how this all plays out. This is the season of misinformation. It seemingly stems from, I don't know, the end of the Super Bowl through the first game of the year. But, when you're sort of looking at what Dallas is doing right now, it does not appear that their plan is to use Neal as a safety. Now, take this with a grain of salt because I don't know what all the different sites are doing. Do we know, and I can look at a couple here while we're on here, is he even considered a linebacker, or what is he here?
I'm looking at our lads, and our lads has him as the backup.
Well, I know
week.
What they have him as, but I just meant the fantasy sites because I think I'm curious to know if they're still viewing him as a linebacker or safety, because that's really going to matter. Now, if he's a backup, it affects it drastically. But Dallas right now, it doesn't look like they're going to be moving forward with him as a safety. They have Wilson, who they liked last year, and then it'll be like something like Kazee or Robinson to sort of play that out. Kazee and Neal both came over as free agents from Atlanta with the Dan Quinn train, as it seems. So we're going to have to see how that all
worked out well there.
Well, when they were on the field, it worked out fine in terms of fantasy. But yeah, it really seems like Neal is going to be a backup linebacker, and we know they're completely revamping their linebacker core. So who knows if injury stuff continues, it's possible he sees the field. But unless something goes drastically bad, he's not going to be like the guy at a linebacker. They're going to have Parsons, Cox, along with Smith and Van Der Esch. I mean, even if Van Der Esch and Smith both get hurt, Parsons is going to be eating up a huge amount of that. Cox has the potential, especially in coverage, to do really well for him once he gets his feet wet. So with what else they have there, if he is a linebacker, tough. I'm just not interested in drafting him. Now, if at some point in the season he ends up playing as a linebacker that's starting and he's getting a good snap share and he has still that safety eligibility in your league, he could be a great pickup for you at that point. But you can't count on that year to year. That would probably just be a 1-year thing if he even still has that.
Yeah, on Flea Flicker, at least he's listed as a safety currently. The tough thing with a lot of the sites is they changed that. I mean, you can update that on the fly. Outside MFL, I think MFL is the only one that really doesn't update immediately. So I would be really careful and I would steer clear. The player, he's talented enough to be top 5. The situation looks super murky. I would agree. And Kraig is our resident Dallas fan. I haven't been as big a Dallas fan since the 90s, like I enjoyed watching them when they won the Super Bowls because they were fun to watch. But now I steer clear of a lot of their defensive assets outside of I've had Jalen Smith shares, but I traded most of those last year come trade deadline. And my last share I traded before a draft this year. Parsons I'm targeting. Other than that, I don't know that I trust it.
Sleeper has him as dual eligibility with defensive back and linebacker. So, I mean, they seem to really love dual designations, which I'm not a big fan of myself. I think there's a situation where it's useful. But beyond that, most situations I don't think call for it. Like, that's one of them. Like, I get, all right, he's been a safety most of his, like, if not all of his career before. They're saying he's going to be a linebacker now. Just give him both. I'd rather see what he actually does. Yahoo has him as a linebacker, just strictly. So, I mean, you're going to see that all over the place is what it seems like. So be aware of what your league is doing with it. But at the same time, I think you also need to be conscious of it doesn't sound like, and that could change in a few months. He's going to be starting right now, so I would not be drafting him as the starter for a team of mine.
Yeah, no, that's dangerous. Now because he's got familiarity with what Dan Quinn does, there's always hope. Man, but I would struggle with that one. I would not feel comfortable telling you to get excited about him. He would be a guy that you certainly are fine with him as a depth piece for now, with the hopes that they make him a starter because he knows the system better than everybody but Kazee on the roster,
And does he have the potential? I mean, yeah, and so as much as, a lot of these guys have potential to end up being really well because of, how he ranked before as a safety in seasons when he was healthy. But you can't just look at what was, you have to look at what the situation currently is as well. And that, I guess, to sum it up more briefly, now that we've talked about it for 5 minutes, the situation negates a lot of that potential to me.
Yeah, it's a dangerous slope you're riding on. And in IDP, there's plenty of other options you can look at. So I wouldn't be jumping. I certainly wouldn't be jumping at this one, Jaws. But, good luck. I wouldn't be afraid to roster him. I just am not trusting him.
We're going to try something on the fly here, Brad. So I'm going to try to share my screen here, and you might have to let this work. I don't know if it's you're gonna. Oh, hey, look at that! It works. So to your point about tendencies and things like that. Now this is for a league that Brad isn't in, but it's been going on. You see, 2012 was our startup here, and this is how we draft because we have a slow draft every year. It's a rookie and veteran draft, so you're going to see stuff that you don't, necessarily would have happen in your league.
Ooh, Jeremy Hill. Trey
yeah,
Mason,
I mean, these are always fun to go back and look
picks.
through, and this is not the same Brad. This is a different Brad.
Yeah, don't do that to me.
don't yell at them for taking Sammy Watkins 1-1. And yes, I know it should be 1.01. And somewhere along the line, that stuff got fixed probably, but maybe not. Either way, the point is that I keep track of all of this stuff because I find it useful. I like having that data, and you can, Google Sheets lets you just go at it forever and keep it to yourself or share with people. But, sort of to Brad's point, if you want to see what someone is doing, year to year and stuff, you can jump around from these sheets. You can even have a sheet, and I do have another one of these. This is all sort of just getting into crazy stuff here. But I have a team draft history, and this was for fun. We grade people's drafts and all that sort of stuff too. But you can kind of see, each year, like who people picked and stuff like that. So my point at getting to that is there's a lot of ways, more than pencil and paper, that you have to keep track of however much information you want for a league. In that league, we keep track of every single trade that league has made since 2012, including initial draft picks. We have people's matchups, every matchup that they've had over the years against every other person, playoffs, all that sort of stuff, because Yahoo, which we had it through up until last year, didn't keep that year to year. But it's fun to know that stuff. And you can use it as a tool to better yourself and familiarize yourself with league trends, team owner trends, anything like that. So to Brad's point about being able to do that sort of stuff, it's really fun. And if you're into that, if you're getting into leagues that much, go for it. It doesn't take up a ton of time if you're starting it fresh. If you're trying to do it on the back end, like I did this probably 5 years ago, and if it started in 2012, you got a good 5-6 years. I had to go data backwards. That's not fun. So if you want to do it up front, and it'll really help you out, I think.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So Josh says, thanks. Already on my squad, but wondering if I need to draft a DB. He's got Jamal Adams as his other starting DB. Well, Jamal Adams, I love. I'm a fan of. He is a keeper and should still be a starter. Year 2 in this defense should take him up another level and be a good thing. I would target, if you haven't had your rookie draft yet, there are plenty of options. I've almost got Javon Holland in nearly every draft because for some reason, even though he wasn't my favorite safety coming into this draft, I love the spot in Miami with him. There are plenty of safeties in this draft that you can target, and I would certainly do so just to make sure, because Keanu Neal's such a slippery slope for you. I would certainly grab one, and there's a couple of good options. Richie Grant, who went to Atlanta, Javon Holland in Miami. Those are two guys off the top of my head that I would target earlier. Those are, depending on your league and all that fun stuff we always say, they're probably early third round picks would be my guess. That's typically where I've been getting them, I believe. But what do you think? Are you adding some depth behind that, Kraig?
I would, and if he wants to throw them in here or let us know afterwards, sort of what's available in free agency. It doesn't just sound off base here like you have an incredibly deep league, so you could probably find a starter, and I would probably suggest trying to find one off of free agency, because I don't know that you're going to have a lot of immediate production out of a rookie this year. There's a lot of rookies that I like the spots of. Well, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's another good 4 safeties that, depending on how stuff pans out in camp, could be in a really good position for production. But without knowing that right now, and if you're looking at a team, because if you had Neal and Adams, you're probably looking at contending, is my guess. Without knowing any more, you probably have a better chance of finding somebody off waivers that's going to give you immediate production while you have someone like Neal on the bench to see what his playing time is and what his role ends up being. Or do you need to go get a rookie in a draft at that point?
I like it. There you go. There's some options, Jaws. And if you haven't had a chance, when you're in your drafts or looking for help, post your questions in the Discord, post your leagues and your rosters and all that stuff in there. Anthony, Jaws wants to know where you posted your draft so you can see it. I don't see it in Discord just yet. It may actually, no, it's not in there yet. That's another chat going off. Pay attention, Kraig.
I am paying attention.
Paying attention to Discord. I like it. So no, it hasn't been posted yet, Jaws, but keep your eye there. I'm sure Anthony will get it up there, relatively quickly. And don't be afraid, folks that are coming across us in the future, pop in Discord. You can post. We see people posting links to their league and their roster and stuff and saying, hey, what do you think about and what should I do with and how should I handle? We're here to help. I do have a lot of guys that'll send me DMs because now that we're starting to really grow and kind of explode in this space, people are starting to say, hey, some of my league mates are in here with me now. I need to ask you a question that I don't want them to see, kind of thing. So don't be afraid to shoot us direct messages. The easiest way to do so, you can do it through Discord or you can do it through Twitter. We, always on this show have our Twitter handles below us. So, shoot us a message. We're here to help. I answer lots of questions. I try to get to them as quickly as humanly possible so that you guys aren't having to wait, but we're here to help either way. If you have questions, throw them in the comments. We're definitely going to try to take care of them. Show's almost over though, Kraig. What else do you want to talk about? Are there any other tips and tricks or strategies that you wanted to bestow upon the amazing viewers?
The only other thing that I'll say, and it feels like I've said this before, but it's not something I say often, unless you're playing in a high stakes league for tons of money and not that I would advocate it, where you really have to win for some reason because of how little control we end up having over this. It is supposed to be for fun. Go get your guy. Now, I'm not saying in a league like we just discussed, go take Javon Holland with 101. But, if he's your guy and you're saying, well, I usually go in the third and I got a mid-second, and you can justify taking him there because you're just completely in love with his player profile and landing spot, it's fantasy football. At the end of the day, this is supposed to be fun and enjoyable. And if you're just so many people, if you get into the thick of it, fantasy football, Twitter and stuff and that, it's all about value, value, value. And if you're trying to win and it's really about the money, you're beating your buddies, all stuff like that, there is a lot to be said for value. Maybe you can go get your defensive back cheaper next year or something like that. But I've always been an advocate of I'm going to go get my guy, and if I get laughed at, whatever, he's on my team, and I'm happy with it, and I can live with it. I'm not throwing enough money where if I'm reaching for a guy like that I'm going to stress over it. I'm not putting my mortgage up on this, $15, $20 a year, something like that. I would rather go get who I want and be happy with my team than be mad seeing them in someone else's roster or something like that.
So what I heard from all that is Javon Holland is the Kyle Pitts of the IDP side of things. You need to go Sully on him and take him at the 101.
I interpreted that from you. So if that's your feel, you and Sully both have your guys like that.
That's the funniest thing is, leading up to this, if you watch some of our shows, I don't have a problem with Holland. I think he was a really nice player coming out of college, but he wasn't like my top guy. Trevin Mulrig was my top guy. He went to Vegas, and that terrifies me. So Javon Holland's kind of become my pseudo top guy because I love the landing spot. And I think, with the value of the player and the quality of the player, the spot works out perfectly. Then they went and released their starter ahead of him.
It's
and
McCain.
It's like, yeah, Bobby McCain. And it's like, it's getting steamy in here. The Holland train is tooting out of the station now.
Yeah, Holland was my top guy pre-draft. And
he was.
I don't know if I still have him there. It's him or Grant, because Grant's
another saucy spot.
Towards the end of the draft process was moving up our boards, and then amazing landing spot with, everyone just vacating that safety position except for Jalen Hawkins, I think was like the one to hold over. And they brought, other people in, but yeah, again, just another great fantasy. So I think they're my 1A, 1B in some order at this point.
Yeah. So Josh says Holland at 4.2 or 5.2, you think? I will say that I took Holland at 3.07 in the positionless draft. Let's see where else I took him at.
If he's your top safety that you like or want, I'm not saying he will be the top taken, but he's probably a top 3 safety in every draft that I've seen. Without knowing your scoring, 4.2 seems about right. Just guessing to me.
Yep, I took him at 4.8 in our XFL league. So somewhere between 3.7 and 4.8 is a good spot in my mind. So 4.2 sounds perfectly fine, Jaws. If you can get him there, I do it. And you should be fine there. That being said, if you don't get him because somebody's watched the stream and taken him before you, my apologies. Now you got to go trade for him, and that. As we've heard many a times from our wonderful friends at FYF, I mean Scott Fish, trading makes fantasy fun. Just saying. So with that being said, I think we're about wrapped up for the evening. So we've talked through some different strategies and different things to think about, as well as what positions to have deeper rosters on IDP, which positions to stream week to week. I would encourage you guys that if you have questions, hit us up. Discord, Twitter, all those places we can answer your questions. rotoheat.com. We've got articles coming out from Kraig. I've got stuff coming out, more Devi related. Randall has some stuff that he's been pumping out. There's a lot out there IDP wise to help you. And we got a lot of great friends in the community as well that, IDP Tipster, he does a great job with fantasy content as well. There's a lot of places to get some IDP help. But we're here if you need us. I do see that Jaws has another. We do have 2/3 safeties. Generally don't get drafted in the third, except Neil and except for Neil and Adams by me. Yeah, I would at 4.2. Like if he's still there, take him at 4.2. If he goes before that, I mean, somebody watch this show. I mean, that's all you can say.
Yeah, and if you're, I don't know if they generally go in the fourth then or not, or if it's some sort of mix of fourth and fifth, but other guys that are generally right there. Grant, we talked about. Mulrig is still being drafted as the safety one by a lot of people, which is fine. To Brad's point, we're like-minded in that it's sort of the antithesis of what we talk about other positions on the offensive side. It's all value, draft for value. With the IDP stuff, man, I've just seen too many guys get ruined by bad situations, and it doesn't seem like they get out of those situations either as much. Or when they do get out, that it just amounts to being anything amazing. There's outliers, of course, for all of this, but the feel without doing any sort of deep study that I don't have, it seems like that just doesn't happen. So if they aren't that way on their team, by and large, they're not going to magically show up on the next team that they go to, if they even get there at all. So Mulrig is he's somewhere in the 3-4 safety for me. I was a big fan of pre-draft and was really happy with the capital of Andre Sisco, and I think he's going to start. For the Jaguars. So, those are sort of the four guys. And really, if I needed a young safety to have on my bench for the future and I got any one of those four, I'd be happy with it. But outside of them, you're probably not going to get a whole lot out of anyone year one.
Absolutely. Good luck, Jaws. We're pulling for you to get your guy, and hopefully it goes well for you. Don't forget, guys, we got the holidays coming up. So next week you won't see us because it is the 4th of July week. Roto Heat's going to be not doing streams next week. We will be putting out content, so make sure you subscribe to all those things. But next week we are going to be off, and then the week after we're going to be coming back, getting you hot and heavy, ready for the season because training camp's around the corner. Our Tuesday show tomorrow, we got a special guest. We got Sam Wallace. He's going to be on. He's a really nice guy, good dude, fun guy. Twitter follow. Yeah, super guy. We're going to be talking fantasy football tips and tricks. So this is kind of the week of strategies and tips here at rotoheat.com. We got Sam Wallace coming up. Then our Tuesday show will be off. And then we've got Cody Woodman, Chris Robin, the Detroit bestie, Eric Moody, Jacob Sanderson. So we got a lot of guests on Tuesday coming up. And truth be told, I'm going to line up some guests for this show as well. I've been talking to some folks and trying to get some guys on there. So, we'll be having some deeper conversations with some other folks. And then before you know it, the season will be here. And then once we get to the season, we're streaming constantly. I mean, basically every night of the week, we got something going. So make sure you keep it locked in here. Share this stuff everywhere. If you could, we would greatly appreciate it. Liking, subscribing, commenting, sharing this on all social media platforms. The folks here at Roto Heat would love it. We appreciate you guys. Kraig, anything else? Any final thoughts before we close this bad boy out?
Nope. Not really.
No,
Love each other, take care of each other, be kind. If you don't, like my mom always said, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all, especially online where it's very easy. You know, if you're getting along with people that you know you can joke around with and it's going to be taken as a joke, great. But remember, the trolls are always still out there ready to take something you say in the wrong way and either ignore them or just move on without them. You know, life is too short to be getting into internet fights with people that you don't know. So
it's the worst. Well,
be kind.
Be kind, rewind. Love you guys. We'll see you next time.
Also, right there, playlist. Hit it. Watch the videos. Do it.